Well, thank you for staying tuned. Now, as the crisis between Russia and Ukraine persists, leaders in the European Commission say they will block most Russian oil imports by the end of 2020 as a means to punish Moscow for invading Ukraine. This recent development is part of the sixth package of sanctions approved at the summit in Brussels, which all the 27 member states have agreed to, had to agree to. Well, this means that the EU-wide ban will affect all that arrives by sea, around two-thirds of imports, but not pipeline oil, following opposition from Hungary. It will interest you to know that Russia currently supplies 27% of EU's imported oils and 40% of its gas, which amounts to 400 billion euros annually. When this embargo takes effect, the big question begging for answer now is how will this country cope? Well, joining me to understand this from the United Kingdom is the startup founder of World Hackers, Mr. Gbenga Onifade. Mr. Onifade, thank you so much for your time. It's good to have you on the show.
Good afternoon.
Yes. First, what would be your reaction to this plan to ban Russian oil imports? Do you think this would be so easy to achieve as planned?
Hi, good afternoon. Firstly, no, it's not going to be that easy because it's very difficult to find alternatives. I mean, we're talking about oil now in this case, which is something that it's in very limited quantity, right? You know, and we haven't really got many suppliers of oil. But when you look at sanctions is supposed to play three different roles. Number one is to serve as a deterrent. Number two, we're looking at it as a punishment. And number three, it's meant to be a structure in order to initiate a leverage to Russia. So in terms of would it serve a purpose? Is it serving the purpose? Number one, I don't think it's serving the purpose because Russians are not retracting. And at the same time, because both of them has got enough time. I mean, this is a 6-month stopgap between when the plan will be initiated or implemented, rather. Russia's got enough time to find an alternative partner. But at the same time, Europe, I think since March anyway, they've actually decided they will change their long-term dependence on Russian gas and fossils. So it's not going to be that easy, but because of that time span, in this case, it's given both parties time to find alternatives or suitable alternatives.
Scary energy price shocks because, of course, it's on the high side now. You're in the United Kingdom. You tell us more about what the price is. And looking at all the moves by the central bank, focused on inflation and all of that, don't you think all of this will further dampen sentiments across board?
Absolutely, you're right. So you've got to pick two things. Do you want to play with people's lives, or do you rather pay something else extra from your pockets? So it doesn't bode very well that we have to pay a lot more for oil, and the repercussions actually been felt worldwide. Some areas, some other oil producing companies have to backfill in this case, but the effect is that it's been passed on to the normal consumers, which is more prices in more prices at the pump stations, and of course it has this overruling effect or domino effect, which eventually passes on to other things. So yes, everything has just gone sky high, not just the petrol. Europe especially depend heavily on the gases, to heat their homes. Thankfully, this is a good time, not exactly a good time for anything when things are going up and prices are being squeezed. But of course, less and less is being used right now, being summer. But at the same time, many things have to be implemented. I think one of the things that was implemented in Germany, which was last week, was the government actually encouraging people to use the public transport so they don't have to drive their cars. And they're giving them a small amount of incentives. I think it's about 20 euros, so they can actually get out more on the public transport, and there's less pressure, and whereby the pockets has been squeezed, coupled with inflation, which is something we probably have seen coming on anyway. But yeah, it's not a good look for either side, not a good look for the government, not a good look for the citizenries.
And if this happens, and I'm also thinking along this line, do you think there are alternative energy supplies or sources, and are they affordable over there?
I think UK has a tiny percentage of their oil from Russia, and So there are, while there are alternatives, but they're not the best alternatives. And one of the alternatives that the far right of movement have been pushing for the government to do Europe-wide is, okay, how about this? What they call fracking, okay, which is where you have to drill the ground so as to get your oil. But Europe is not exactly that impressed with having to to pressurize their own soil. Okay, number one. Number two, it's polluting the environment. So it's not exactly what you're going to do overnight, what you're going to achieve overnight. It takes some time for the infrastructure to be there. And so this wasn't planned. Nobody knew the mind of Putin, unfortunately. This was not planned. And it's not going to be that easy to do. It's not going to be that cheap. Where's the money coming from? Because right now people are being squeezed. So it's not being affordable. And number two is going to ECOWAS, going to the oil producing nations, Saudi Arabia and the likes, and asking them to ramp up production. We know that things are not exactly as smooth in terms of situations generally. Number two, another thing is that everybody wants to contend with filling their own countries, satisfying their countries first before they actually go out there. So alternatives is not going to be that easy. Number two, another point is the fact that Russia gives extreme discounts to Europe. I'm not sure if Europe is going to get that anywhere else. And if you think about America, America's not been supplying its oil. America's actually been very good in conserving their own oil and importing from Russia and from the rest of the world. One of the pressure Biden is facing at home, even though America is one of the 8 biggest suppliers has one of the 8 biggest oil reserves in the world, but they're not really using it. And people are saying, President, what's going on? Let's use the oil at home. So, and USA has actually been pushing all a while back for this. Is actually a gas. They call it the freedom gas, in the name, for Europe to be buying the gas from them instead of Russia. This probably is an opportunity, but as long as Europe is still buying from Russia right now, the alternative is what they're gonna have to be looking for. But in this day where people are being squeezed, I think everybody's buying that time. And yes, talks are taking forever. Hungary, which is strategically placed, Slovakia, Hungary, Slovakia, what's the other country? Croatia, all placed near Russia. Some of these guys have said it's going to be very difficult because their refineries are built in order to take Russian gases. If you remember back in history, most of these guys used to be a part of the Soviet Union, and now they say they need to retool their refineries so as to be able to take other petrol, crude oil from other countries, because this has actually been refined, been stationed, gradually been designed to strictly take Russian oil. The money is going to have to come from somewhere. Again, that's pressure on EU, and this is why this agreement took a while, because EU is not willing to fund it. But now they're saying, okay, we'll give you an extra year. So even though the whole 27 EU states, or the majority of them, are winding down in 6 months, these other 3 countries have been given some extra leeway. And unfortunately, EU is going to have to fund that. And where it's going to come from, it's going to be extra money from the taxpayers, unfortunately.
Great stuff there from you, as usual. Now, all of this is to sanction Russia against what is happening in Ukraine, obviously. But don't you think they could find other buyers, maybe like China and India, when the EU decides to stop buying oil from them?
Well, China cannot use enough of oil, so China is actually thinking they might suit in well, replace the EU. When it comes to getting this oil. If EU says they're going to stop taking the oil, China wants to fit in, India wants to fit in their place, but they're going to demand exact same amount in terms of discounts which EU is getting. I'm not sure Russia is ready to give that away, because when you look at strategically positions, Russia and India are not exactly too far away from Russia, but at the same time, it's not exactly the next door neighbor, okay? So that's one big pointer right there. These guys want to backfill for the EU, while the EU is backing out. Russia and India and China want to backfill in there. They can't use enough. These guys are the next globalizations of the world. They want to backfill. It's not going to be that easy for them. The infrastructure is not there yet. Even the routes are still not safe, because as the war is still going on, because the EU or the United States and the allies, they're still saying we still have more armories in our pockets, okay? the whole essence is just to ensure this war, number one, it stops, and number two, they don't want anyone putting them in that position, that situation whereby they do not have a choice than to, where someone has to call their bluff, mainly, really. So why Russia and China can backfill, it's going to cost Russia a little bit of money, and they're just not going to be as rich as they are. And at the same time, Russia and China will be looking for exact same discount, if not more, because now Russia is actually put in this poor position whereby they probably might have to beg, okay, just to be able to get that discount.
Natural gas is actually not included in this sanction plan. That seems to be like the big elephant in the room. What do you think is responsible for this?
Well, I mean, natural gas is not presently right now. It's not the highest in terms of demand. This is the summer, and we do have a few, probably 4 or 5 months before the cold starts heating up. Start getting cold all over again. So strategically, if you think about where we are, this is the summer. Natural gas, it's not exactly needed. There's a lot of countries who still have their reserves, even though Russia turned off the oil from Bulgaria and Poland. These guys already have the reserves, and they have more than enough to serve them over the summer. But in Europe, in December during the winter, when the cold starts biting, and we start getting the environment start getting to extreme lows, then we will start talking by then. But I think they intentionally chose not to include natural gas. Why? Because they probably think the war would have ended then. Because I mean, you got to understand both sides need each other rather than saber rattling, and they're thinking, okay, by that time comes December, there's still a little bit of politics involved. Okay, comes that time in December, if the war is still ongoing, or maybe before then, they might start giving them extra time, just to be able to buy the time. Russia needs the money to fund the war. So Europe might come December, Europe might say, okay, we'll give you another 3-4 months. We're going to start winding down on your gas. At least they're able to get to use the gas, because gas should not come first, because that's what's needed later on. But oil is needed right now. You've got 6 months. So come 6 months, they might start imposing the sanctions and the sanctions and extra dispositions on gases as well come December, which means it would not come into effect until the next year's summer anyway. So that's another way. You've got to think about it strategically. Maybe it's another way to buy extra time, number two, but at the same time, natural gas, it would not, I mean, they still have to find an alternative. So you don't just switch both off at the same time. But you've got to understand also there's a crippling effect on Russia too. So you can't turn both of them off at the same time. You've got to turn it off one at a time. That's how how do you eat an elephant? Like I say, it's in chunks. It's a small chunk. So once Russia feel this, if it proceeds into an effect, and it still goes on, and this whole muscle is still going on, the war is still effective. Come December, then probably get another deadline for the natural gas to start winding down on natural gas. But when it comes to natural gas, I think UK's got a little bit of it, and where this comes into force is that the oil exporting corporations, countries, they don't really get as much beta when it comes to the winter like Europe. So I'm not sure they do actually have that leverage when it comes to natural gas. So there's that heavy reliance on natural gas on Russia as well. And America only supply about 11% of Europe's needs of natural gas. So there will be a bit of an issue. So when it comes to what you need most, you put that on the side first, but you talk about what you need less, and that's what you tackle with. So there's more gas needed, because that's about survivals really, compared to oil, which is oil, even though it's not exactly easy to arrange an alternative, but it's easier to find an alternative than natural gas. So let's deal with the one first, which is going to pose less issue before we get to the gas.
Brilliant stuff. Let's wrap up with the impact on markets. We see the Russian ruble continues to stay on the low. What impact is this having on global markets?
Absolutely. Funny enough, many people are actually thinking, because it's actually trading high, and a lot of people tend to think, oh no, the Russian ruble is actually on the all-time high. But you absolutely nailed it right there. It's actually trading very low. Number one. Number two, it's not being traded in the open market. Russia, which is why Russia's trying to force that that dependence on them, to force a way out, and asking other countries, if you want to take our oil, you've got to accept, let's initiate this leverage by you taking our ruble. It's not being traded on the open market. There's so many sanctions being leveraged or being levied on Russia. So many foreign big corporations pulling out of Russia. So as a result of that, Russian ruble is not being traded in the open market. It's not being accepted. They're banning more Russian banks from the SWIFT system. I think that might be the next thing. There might be more involvement, more ban of people involved in the war crimes. And when we're talking about the ban on people, we're talking about the heavyweight oligarchs, okay? And even I think the broadcasters are banned right now, which they can't even advertise and accept the dollar or foreign currency. So if there's not much exchange coming in, then you just have a pile of ruble and it's not worth much. And therefore, nobody's willing to accept it. Therefore, the values actually keep plunging. And there will be the ripple effect on the poor Russians, unfortunately, which is the effect of war we can find right now.
I must thank you. It's a good way to live it. Startup founder, the wealth hackers, Mr. Gbenga Onifade. Thank you so much for your time on the show. We appreciate this.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.